Hello and welcome to Mooks and Monsters. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me is Brendan Nadeau. Welcome back to the show, Nadeau.
Hello.
So this week we are talking transitions between whole games even. So I mean, we've talked small transitions on the show with Rob Ward. We've even talked transitioning, how you switch between two different games. But Brendan has done something on this show that, no, not on this show. He's done something in his game recently, and we mentioned in the previous episode that it's really fascinating, and I'll let him take it away for a moment.
Okay. Yeah, so basically what the idea I had in mind is that I was running a Curse of Strahd module in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I wanted to take it match the setting into basically World of Darkness. Again, it's old New World of Darkness. So
that's a different system. We should be clear. That's a different system. It's a different game altogether, basically.
Absolutely. And because we run the little history behind that is we'd run it in the past, but not for very long. And I kind of miss that system because, again, whereas 5th edition and Dungeons & Dragons in general is very story driven, the World of Darkness is very character driven. So the story is kind of is ancillary to whatever the characters are doing. You want to have characters have a good story and how they interact with the main plot rather than vice versa.
Mm-hmm. So you went from a medieval style, or at least a historical, in some sense, not historical, but a fantasy setting, basically. A D&D, a fantasy setting, to a more historically based, more recent setting, right? The 1980s in Chicago.
Yes. So this presented obviously a lot of problems. So basically, the couple major problems that I faced in doing this was, and we're still experiencing, is how do we transition from 5th edition to World of Darkness? How do we get the story to transition from Curse of Strahd and into World of Darkness? And how do we basically, how does that fit in the lore that we've created? Because basically, when I transitioned to a World of Darkness, I basically am writing it from whole. It's now homebrew, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So so you went from a module as well to basically a homespun campaign. That's cool. And how did the characters work in particular? You did mention how important the characters are in World of Darkness.
Yeah. So characters, basically, I had basically talk out with our entire group. We would experience obviously works a lot differently. Whereas 100 experience in 5th edition is like nothing. Mm-hmm. That's a minor encounter, if even. 100 experience in World of Darkness is a substantial. So basically, I gave in World of Darkness you have different skills and different social skills. You have different physical skills. You have different basically stuff that you can put this experience into, but the currency is worth a lot. Experience gets you a lot further than in 5th edition, and as a consequence, experience, I haven't even awarded any experience in World of Darkness because it's so if you get something
powerful,
it's very powerful. You can't waste it. So So I'm going to be running my third game, in 2 weeks, and basically I have more experience where you just gave basically in 5th edition, you give out experience like it's candy.
Right. So that's a different way to run the game, that's for sure. But as far as the actual change point, how did you do that? How did you do we were in Ravenloft and now we're, just go over that for a second.
Yeah. So, from a story perspective, if you're asking, probably.
Yeah, basically,
okay.
Yes.
So the end of the confrontation is I'd set up where the entire party was now in Castle Ravenloft, and we basically they're fighting Strahd, but I had
the vampire, Master Vampire, for those not acquainted, but most of us are.
Yeah. So yeah, Strahd the vampire, and but I had one of the player characters. He was actually playing another villain. So I had the party fight Strahd for 5 turns, and basically Strahd got vaporized by this other character named Omniel, and Omniel basically did a what's called a I guess it's a face heel turn. They turned a heel in wrestling as a person who is the bad guy.
The bad guy, yeah.
And so they done a long time ago, and basically they were like a parallel villain to Strahd, and actually they're actually probably even a even like greater scope villain than Strahd, because they basically hate vampires, but they also hate everything. So they were in the way, and so what happened is Omniel released a pretty stringent attack, and that caused a little story-wise. It caused basically a tear to happen in Forgotten Realms that basically transported a bunch of people in Curse of Strahd over to present-day Chicago. And the party found themselves basically in Lincoln Park in Chicago with all their weaponry and gear, and very confused because like we were just fighting Strahd, and now we're in a park with all these very weird buildings, and what's going on?
Yeah. No, that's pretty funny. But and other characters were transferred as well from other parts of the world, probably. Is what you were saying?
A major like a major NPC, Van Richten, I think, or Riften. He's basically Van Helsing, but just not Van Helsing.
Not
he was
Van Helsing.
Yeah, he was so people were transported at different times. So the main party members, because my group was playing different characters sometimes, so they would play one character or another character. So like they would switch between characters. So one character got transported to the Revolutionary War, and actually it's their descendant who is part of this other group who is fighting against Strahd, 200 years later. Strahd himself got transported into 1984, and now he basically like, well, I better make light of the situation, and he took over like all the vampire clans in Chicago, and it has his own big corporation. Someone got transported into a wall and they died. You don't have to go into all the details. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, but that's interesting. So Strahd got transported into the world before them. The villain is now. He's still the main villain. Is that kind of how it's set up? Yes, and as well as the other parallel villain. Omniel. But Omniel was only transported 2 weeks before these guys. So everyone got basically, long story short, everyone got scattered all over the place. But they're all now here in 1986 Chicago.
Yeah. Okay. So that's cool. I really like the idea of maintaining the story going forward. That's kind of the thing that's most intriguing to me about the way you did this. Is it is still the same story, but it's a different rule set and it's a different, everything else. And that's something I don't know. I've never done that, and yet it seems really compelling actually, because it's like these characters are bigger than just Castle Ravenloft and all that stuff. So go on.
And the reason why I want to keep the same characters rather than having to make new characters is it just provides continuity. But they've been working these characters for basically about a year now, so it's kind of nice to have these characters show up, and you're still working with. Even though all that's similar is the name, it's still the same person, and so yeah.
There's no mechanics telling you that the character needs to be what the character could do anymore that are the same. But there are there's a ton of stuff that says this is the same guy, basically. Yeah. Same personality is there probably. And presumably the same person is playing them in each case.
Yes.
But I guess that could be variable because you're at least letting them play different characters sometimes. So that's interesting too.
Yeah. In one case, one person is playing the descendant. So yeah.
Okay. Neat. So I guess my main question here is, were there any challenges you had when you did this transition, or was it pretty easy?
Story-wise was pretty easy. It's easy to write a story, as you well know.
Yeah, I suppose, it's true, yeah. Relatively easy. Some people would say not, but there you go.
So, because it was very, all I had to do was, because World of Darkness is nice, because all you have to do is really put an outline, and you just let the characters basically write the story for you. more or less. But mechanically, I had to sit down with basically the entire like group or individually and be like, okay, so I'm giving you 100 XP to put in to this new character sheet. You have the weaponry or the equivalent. So of like some people are carrying swords. Swords make an appearance in World of Darkness. That's easy. Armor was kind of a different story. So like some people were wearing chainmail. Chainmail is okay because that also pops up in World of Darkness. However, it's like, well, I'm wearing scale mail. There's no equivalent of that in World of Darkness. Yeah. So basically, it's we had to basically sometimes I think we had to roll. It was there's like some other like sort of light armor they could get or something like that.
Okay, so you just replaced it with something similar.
Yes. Obviously, they couldn't take any proficiencies in weaponry, or like not weaponry but firearms because
they just wouldn't have any chance to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they had no opportunity. They didn't know what firearms were. So I had to tell them like you can't do this. You can do put stuff in languages, but when you're transported to a different world, you're not going to speak the language. So they basically have a translator who is walking around with them like all the time, like interpreting, like who speaks both Common and English. So because that's in their story and game mechanics type of thing.
Yeah. So if you had trouble with anything, you tried to streamline it though. It seems like you didn't go to a lot. You didn't like make up rules for scale mail in World of Darkness, for example.
No, that would be really difficult. We could possibly do like a homebrew thing, but to be honest, it really isn't worth it because you're getting more stuff. Like you're gonna know how to use guns. You're gonna know how to like put on a flak vest. You're gonna know how to drive a car. Stuff.
Yeah, you'll learn all that stuff over time.
You'll learn all that stuff that'll help you in World of Darkness. So there really wasn't much point in making rules for something that you'd only use for maybe 2 or 3 sessions at most.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, and probably has pretty close equivalences anyway. Yeah. So I guess I guess what I'm saying is, did you think this was a successful transition? You think? I mean, you've run a couple sessions in World of Darkness now. How has it been?
It's been the first session was a little bit rough because again, it's been a while since any one of us has played World of Darkness. But by the second session, we'd all kind of settled into our roles, and we kind of knew how stuff is supposed to be rolled. Like, okay, I need to make a wits intelligence check, and instead of rolling like d20s, this game is almost completely d10 based. Like you almost exclusively use d10s, and a success.
So there was a little getting used to there.
Yeah. A success is 8, 9, or 10, and 10 you reroll. So
and you should basically get another try at it too. You can get an additional.
Yes, basically. So yeah. So like story wise, like someone like in the previous session, they came across a computer, an Apple II. They don't know what it is, so they're like, excuse me, person, who knows how to do this? Can you look at this thing? And so, story-wise, that was like that made sense because they didn't know what a computer was, but also they also had to get a person who knew how to use it, and then also I gave that person a chance to hack the computer. They looked underneath the keyboard, they got the password. So
that's a more realistic kind of hacking, I guess.
Yeah,
or at least that more. Let me say simple and effective, probably.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, so I guess the other thing I've got to say is, so going forward, you're planning to run more of this game, obviously, right? You said you got a game coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff are you continuing the same kind of themes, if you even think about themes in your games, the same kind of conflicts as you had in the past, or are you trying to use the World of Darkness? What are the advantages of changing over to World of Darkness, I guess?
World of Darkness kind of changes over to something that I like, which is a kind of like a techno thriller spy type of thing. Everything's very covert and very very like in the shadows. So it fits in with like I like Cold War stuff. So this is at the tail end of the Cold War. So I'm using stuff like number stations to send out like code transmissions. I have the party listen to like recorded number, like known number stations and the numbers on there, like, and try to like have them figure out what it means. Stuff like definitely like they have to like go investigate different locations and explore, basically like break into places and do like they can't like get into like fights because like in 5th edition and you can get into fights whenever you want. Basically here, you can't do that as much because you'll attract too much attention and then you'll have the police called on you and then you spend the night in jail.
So you can't just get away with the all the violence and mayhem people get away with in D&D. So it provides a different kind of attitude to the story. That's for sure.
Yeah, they've only gotten to one fight too, so that's really my. I want to like keep fights sporadic but memorable.
Yeah, I've noticed actually that having too much action in an RPG, at least for me, that's become an issue sometimes. I mean, I haven't run many RPGs this year, but if you're always in a combat situation, that can be kind of frustrating. For me, yeah.
I'm taking kind of like the I don't know if you've seen the movie like Sicario, but in Sicario, basically like there was some like action at the very beginning, but after that, it takes 40 minutes to build up to a action scene that takes maybe like 13 seconds, but it is a amazing build up to that point, and that's what I'm trying to do is build up, just keep ratcheting that tension up, ratchet like behind a corner, like what's going to happen? Like, are we going to, if I snip a wire wrong, is that going to call in a legion of like reinforcements? Is that going to, call down the wrath of Strahd? Is that what's going to happen into this place we break in that we're not supposed to, or ask the wrong question around someone? So that's what I keep doing. And I've got a pretty substantial conflict coming up that basically is just going to keep ratcheting up, and then it just kind of like explodes. So
you really are leaning on the suspense side of things here, more than the action side, and that's really cool. I like that. I appreciate that. Yeah,
there was a lot of conflict, and it's just a lot to keep track of. And again, I'm still getting used to the combat system in World of Darkness, so that's also kind of the reason why I haven't had a lot of conflict as of late too, because again, still getting used to game mechanics. But once we get a good handle on this, on the mechanics of basically everything in World of Darkness, I think it'll provide a really great story in the end.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're doing it's a really cool thing, and it sounds like your players are probably having a bunch of fun with it too. I would be if I was among your players. Let me put it that way. It sounds like a good time. But so, do you have any tips for other people who might want to transition a game between systems, or or just in general changing over from big points of a game? Because really, that's kind of what you did. You got the same story, it just had a big change in the middle, kind of thing.
Yeah. So my main tips were basically have like a in-game like knowledge, like a game reason why you're transitioning over from one system to another. You can't just be like, okay, now we were just in Forgotten Realms and now we're in like a modern D20 game. That you can't just like throw your people in there and be like, okay, here you go, and not have a reason for that. You need to basically sit down and take the time with all your players, and you have to get permission from your players too, because if none of them were on board with this, or if you knew that they're on board with this, because I actually did kind of spring it on them a little bit, but because it was also it was a story wise, it was a bit of a surprise. So, but you have to know that your characters, your players will be on board with it if you transition in one direction. So I knew I could get away with doing it, but if you have people you're not, so like experienced around, they'd be like, oh wait, we were playing D&D. I signed in for D&D, not for, World of Darkness.
Or whatever other game,
or whatever game system.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you have that player buy-in is definitely very important. And then basically just taking time to find the equivalencies in your equipment and all their different skills, and having a transition over into the new system. So we had to take a couple of weeks basically to transition from fifth edition D&D to World of Darkness, and thankfully we had the books and we had the character sheets and enough knowledge to get away with it. But if you're transitioning to another system, you better know at least a little bit about it before moving everyone over to that new system.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a pretty good place to leave it. I mean, I think is there anything else you want to say though about the transition you had during the game?
I think it went. I was surprised how smooth or relatively smooth it went. There were a couple of hiccups the first game because we were like, okay, what does this skill do? Oh, okay, it does that. So we had to get clarification, and we're still learning. But it's been fun. I'm glad we did it. And story wise, I like writing the plot for it because there's a lot of good stuff I've got in store for my players, and it's fun overall, and that's what gaming is all about.
Yeah. We don't say that enough, maybe. Yeah, but yeah, having fun. Yeah, that's the point of the gaming. And so, folks, I hope you all had fun. You can find more of this show at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find us on Libsyn, where we're hosted. I always forget the Libsyn address. Sorry, people. But if you search up this show of Mooks and Monsters, and you'll find us on Libsyn, rest assured. So you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at tneaterwriter. And you can follow Brendan on Twitter. He's at NATO, correct?
I don't usually go on Twitter all that much nowadays.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. Don't follow Brendan on Twitter then.
Yeah. So I have an Instagram, NATO 1949 4.
Oh, right. Okay, of course. And also, don't forget this show is not available on Facebook, but we have a Facebook group with where fans can post about the show and listeners can ask us questions and stuff. So definitely check that out. I believe it's of Mooks and Monsters on Facebook. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good week.